going to ask those who are wearing the Kriya ribbon to please rise at this time. For hearts that are torn, we offer this blessing. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, dayan ha'emet. Mizmor LeDavid, Adonai mi ya'agor beha'alecha, mi yishkon bahar kadshecha, a psalm of David. Do we deserve to enter God's sanctuary? Can we merit a place in the presence of God? Live with integrity, do what is right, speak the truth without deceit. Have no slander upon your tongue. Do no evil to others. Do not mistreat your neighbor. Spurn a contemptible person, but honor those who revere Adonai. Never retract a promise once made, though it may bring you harm. Lend no money at unfair rates. Accept no bribe against the innocent. Make these deeds your own, then shall you stand firm forever. The way of God is perfect. The word of Adonai is pure. God is a shield to all who seek refuge.
Music of life. The music of this life has ended. The final chord has been played, yet the symphony continues even after death, its melodies filling our memories. Beauty and life, harmony of love and friendship remains ours to savor. Energetic tempos of youth blend into stately rhythms of age, leaving their mark on the passage of time. Recalling moments of haunting beauty as well as measures of discord and pain, we pause, quietly remembering. For one, a final note has sounded, yet we hear the melody, lilting, lingering. The music flows, guiding us to create our own symphony. These things I know. These things I know, how the living go on living, and how the dead go on living with them, so that in a forest, even a dead tree casts a shadow, and the leaves fall one by one, and the branches break in the wind, and the bark peels off slowly, and the trunk cracks, and the rain seeps through the cracks, and the trunk falls to the ground, and the moss covers it, and in the spring the rabbits find it, and build their nest inside the dead tree, so that nothing is wasted in nature or in love.
Today, we stand at one of life's most natural and unnatural moments. Today, we mourn one whose death has taken from us. This we know is the way of nature. All people born will die. All living beings succumb to death. Yes, knowing death is a natural part of life brings little comfort. So we use words from the Jewish tradition to honor the memory of Lilah and the contribution she made to our community and our world. Those words come from the book of Proverbs. Eshet chayil mi yimtza, a woman of valor who can find. She is more precious than corals. Her husband places his trust in her and profits only thereby. She brings him good, not harm, all the days of her life. She seeks out wool and flax and cheerfully does the work of her hands. She opens her hands to the poor and reaches out her hands to the needy. She has no fear of the snow, for all her household is dressed in fine clothing. She is robed in strength and dignity, and she smiles at the future. She opens her mouth with wisdom, and a lesson of kindness is on her tongue. She looks after the conduct of her household and never tastes the bread of laziness. Her children rise up and make her happy. Her husband praises her. Give her credit for the fruit of her labors, and let her achievements praise her. Grace is elusive and beauty is vain, but a woman who fears God shall be praised. Many women have excelled, but you exceed all of them.
We gather here today to mourn the death of Lilah Warshawsky. With her death just days ago, there's a loss, an emptiness, and a void which never again will be filled. When a person is born, a singular and distinct individual enters our world, and on the day she was born, the world was transformed. Her life graced our world, enriched it, and now that unique person is no longer. And again, our world has been transformed. So to Susan, to Jeffrey, Lewis, to lose your mom, the one who carried you as babies, who took care of you for your childhood and saw you become full adults. All she ever wanted was to become a mom, and you were the fulfillment of a dream for her. There is no way to be fully prepared for the death of a mother, so your loss today is incredibly great. Not just because of the loss of your mom, but also the grief of the recent loss of Roy, your father, as well. And to Sage, Marina, Wendy, and Barry, and Catherine, Lilah's beloved granddaughters, she loved you, and you shared a very deep bond with her as a result. She was an amazing bubby, she was devoted and kind, and you were gifts to her. She loved being a mom and grandmother, and our words are inadequate to convey the sorrow that we feel for all of you today. But we offer these words as comfort to you. And so to offer insight into Lilah's life, at this time, I invite forward Lilah's cousin, Janice Abelman.
First, I want to thank Sue for offering me the honor to be up here today. And I apologize for having to read what my remarks will be because my memory is very poor, and it's a short speech, but I didn't want to leave things out. I came to Eitz 16 years ago. I didn't know anyone here, but a lot of folks were very nice to me, and I would sit next to various people from week to week at Shabbat services. That's how I got to know Lilah and Roy Warshawsky. Because Lilah was so warm and friendly, I started choosing a seat next to her on a regular basis. Then I discovered I had a connection to Roy, going way back to the late 1950s. When I learned their last name was Warshawsky, I told them that I lived next door to Joe and Mary Warshawsky from the time I was in 5th grade to my first year of college. Joe and Mary owned 2 apartment buildings side by side, and we rented one of their apartments. We lived there a long time, and our 2 families became close. I asked Roy if he was related, and he told me that Joe was his uncle. This didn't come as much of a surprise because Roy was the spitting image of his Uncle Joe. They looked alike and walked and talked so much alike, more so than anyone I've ever known. So there's the first connection. But wait, there's more. Sometime later, I joined Ancestry.com and was contacted by a woman who found my name on her family tree. She was pretty far advanced in her search, and she kindly sent me 8 pages of lineage of my maternal grandfather's side of the family. And there on page 6, as plain as day, were the names Lilah and Roy Warshawsky, and their children and their grandchildren. When I told Lilah and Roy, Lilah was delighted, but Roy was having none of it. I'm not sure what he was thinking, but somehow it just didn't seem kosher to him. Roy was quite the amateur genealogist in his own right, and he went to his computer to see if the information I had was right. He found that it was, and he kindly printed out his work for me. And there it was. Lilah and I trace ourselves back to one Michael Klong, who lived in Romania in the middle of the 19th century. He was Lilah's great-grandfather through her father's side of the family, and he was my great-great-grandfather through my mother's side of the family. This made Lilah and I second cousins once removed. From that point on, Lilah and I always called each other cousin. Lilah and Roy had me to their home a couple times where I enjoyed Lilah's amazing cooking. She even invited my dog Wilson. Anytime someone came to sit next to us at the temple, they had to listen to our story, because Lilah and I were so intrigued and delighted by it. And although we both came to know it pretty late in our lives, I think lovingly of her as family. Her life was, and her memory may be a blessing. Rest easy, Lilah.
At this time, I invite forward our Rabbi Emeritus, Rabbi Stephen Bob.
I cannot pretend that I knew Lilah all of her life. I first met Lilah 25 years ago after a high holiday service. Roy and Lilah stepped forward to introduce themselves to me. They were brand new members of the congregation. They had recently moved from the city here to Lombard. During my sermon that morning, I had mentioned that I wanted to learn to play the banjo, and Roy volunteered to teach me. I accepted the offer, which began a series of visits to Roy and Lilah's home. I quickly became a regular at Roy and Lilah's home every Thursday afternoon. I don't have actual statistics, but I believe I spent more time in Roy and Lilah's home than I have in the home of any other member of the congregation. If I was a different person, I would know numbers, but I'm not. Lilah always greeted me with a smile, and after my lesson, I got a cookie. At least one. I always received a freshly baked treat. Many members of the congregation have given me home-baked goodies. For obvious reasons, I have avoided ranking the cookies created by members of this congregation. But it's no secret, Lilah's were the best. I knew it, she knew it, everybody knew it. My favorite were the pinwheels. I came to services pretty regularly during my years as rabbi of the congregation. And I had a running joke for myself that before Friday night services, I would go into the kitchen to see what was going to be served for the oneg, and I would look at what was being served and decided whether I was going to stay for services or not. Every week I decided to stay. But some weeks I was happier about what was going to be served because I saw Lilah was here. Some people move to a new community and lament that they do not know anybody. This was not Lilah's approach. Lilah quickly became an active member of the congregation. Very quickly, everybody knew Lilah. She was a key member of our sisterhood. Her circle of friends in the congregation extended well beyond her own age group. Everybody loved her. Lilah was very good to me. Perhaps because I was such a regular visitor to her home, she saw me as a person, not just as the rabbi. She encouraged me, she supported me. On occasion, my banjo teacher had to chastise me for not practicing enough. You can imagine this. Lilah would comfort me. After the lesson, I would be prepared to leave with my banjo in hand, and she would give me a kind word and a delicious cookie. Lilah touched us all with her ever-present smile and her generous spirit. Lilah was small, but in many ways, she was a giant. I know that I stand taller because Lilah was part of my life.
At this time, I invite forward Lilah's son, Jeffrey.
Good afternoon, or good morning, or whatever we call it. I am the second son. My brother didn't find it necessary to be here, but that's life. Louis is Louis. And my mother, Lilah Rose Nadler, was the baby in the family. Was never allowed to forget that, because even her own relatives would say that. Oh, look, it's the baby. And she was also a magnificent baker. She made the greatest butter cookies I've ever tasted. And unfortunately, I won't get to taste them again unless one of the nieces has the recipe. You're drafted to do that. She was from the West Side. Actually, where our store was at 18th and Wabash, they lived in a house on Prairie Avenue between the actually it was next to the field house, Marshall Field, the third junior house, and which was on the same side of the street as the, God damn it, can't remember the name of that house. But I grew up on the south side, and I knew that my mother lived or came from that neighborhood because she never let us forget it. It was the Kimball House. That's what it was. It was the Kimball House. And I can imagine those houses on Prairie Avenue were really quite ornate, because even those that still stand are very ornate. But they moved to the West Side, which is when my mother was born, on the West Side. And she also went to Marshall High School. Marshall High School is, and still is, a champion basketball team. But we will no longer get the opportunity to be with Lilah Rose Nadler. She's gone from us. And all I can do is wish that she was still here. Thank you all for coming.
At this time, I invite forward Lilah's daughter, Susan Schroeder.
Thanks, Jeff, for telling some of the stories that I don't always remember so much as you do. Thank you. So here we are again. I should be getting good at this. Before I go into what I wrote, it occurred to me when we first sat down and the rabbi spoke, and as much as everyone loved my mom, and she had a smile and a cookie for everyone, people really didn't know her, didn't know about her life. And so it turns out that what I wrote down, while it all kind of revolves around me, because that's what I knew, everything, I think you'll hear, everything kind of, yeah, it tracks. My mom, Lilah, Bobby, the cookie lady. However you knew my mom, you know how special she was. Some called her the Energizer Bunny. Most called her the Energizer Bunny. She just kept going and going, and we really believed that would never stop, or we wished it. But she did. She did. Where to start? Mom threw herself into everything she did. Gardening, especially her prized roses. Mom was always accumulating houseplants, too, much to her chagrin. Everyone knew she had an incredible green thumb, so it was an obvious gift. She was too good at it. Mom loved to be outside. I think the gardening grew from that. In the summer when I was young, we were at the local pool nearly every morning, or so it seemed to me. Mom didn't swim, but she loved the sun. I'd splash around and take lessons while she sunned with the neighborhood moms. Then we'd go home for lunch, and Mom would spend the afternoon in the garden or sunning some more. On summer Sundays, we'd go boating with Dad. More sun. She really loved the sun. But dancing. She told stories of how she took ballet as a child and so wanted to be a professional ballerina. And she was good. I'm not sure of what age she was, but the story goes that she was offered an opportunity to study in New York at a high-level dance school. My Bobby didn't agree with that idea, so Mom moved on to other passions. But dance never left. It wove a thread through most of the rest of her life. She once told me she'd never have married a man who couldn't dance. My dad could dance. I'm not sure if I included it on my list of Dad's passions, but oh, could they dance. It was always a treat at family events to watch them swirl around the dance floor, and they would attend folk and square dance events whenever they could. And as my Brownie and Girl Scout troop leader, which Jeff said he was going to mention, but he didn't. She was also the den mother for his and Lou's Boy Scout, Cub Scout troops. So she was always very, 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 very involved in all of our lives. Mom made sure we got every badge in the Brownie and Girl Scout troop, every badge that had anything to do with dance. She taught us square dance and all sorts of folk dances. Most of them I still remember to this day. If I hear the right tune, I'll start the dance, even if I'm sitting down. We girls were ahead of the curve when those classes came in middle school PE. Mom was always involved in my activities, as involved as she could be, from troop leader to room mom to field trip chaperone. I love that Mom was always along for the fun. Of course, she was also my chauffeur to all my activities and carpooled other kids from the neighborhood. Thinking about it, I think she was just the neighborhood driver. I don't ever remember riding in anybody else's car. When activities were on Saturday, she loved to listen in the car to a radio show called Those Were the Days, where they played all the radio shows from her childhood. I loved learning about that bit of nostalgia. of course, it was also on in the kitchen on Saturdays if we were home. She was an amazing seamstress, too. Mom sewed many of my dresses for special occasions. I still have a few of them, and what I don't have is probably still in the basement. And she was the lead costumer for the Morton Grove Music Theater. I loved getting to hang out at those rehearsals and watch the whole process come together, and it was another opportunity for me to hang out with Mom and learn all kinds of sewing processes and techniques. Eventually, though, Mom found true joy in what everyone knows her for, baking. I would sit in the kitchen for hours and watch and learn as she created all her specialties until eventually she started a business of it and opened a kitchen in downtown Morton Grove. That's where we grew up. With everything she did, Mom tried to be by my side or keep me by hers for as long as possible. And I treasure every one of those moments. So many more than I can share today. They'll be with me forever, as will my mom and dad, forever in my heart.
Lilah Nadler Warshawsky was the youngest daughter of Adele and Louis Nadler. Two of her sisters, Sarah and Esther, survived into adulthood, along with her brother Israel. Rose and Frida died when they were younger. Lilah would recall that it was her sister Sarah who mostly raised her, as Lilah was the child of parents of advanced age. We know the story of how she met Roy on a double date. They were not the couple dating, but later, Roy went back and asked her out. Lilah worked for the JCC in Skokie and worked her way up from switchboard operator to membership manager. She and Roy raised their children on the Morton Grove-Skokie border, and like Sue said, as a young mom, Lilah was involved in everything. Of course, Sue talked about the Morton Grove Bakery, where she worked from the mid-1980s until 1999, when she and Lilah retired so that she and Roy could move closer to Sue, and she joined Congregation Etz Chaim. On a personal note, when my twins were born, my youngest son had an affinity for Lilah. I think it was because as he grew, he saw someone his size, and he would go to her and give her hugs. And then Joe would, on his own, say, "Mom, I'd like to go visit Lilah," and I would take them to Lilah and Roy's house. Joe shared with Lilah that he had a new girlfriend, and so Lilah went and cut some roses from her garden to give to him, to give to his girlfriend. Many tributes to Lilah have poured in from friends who knew her. Steve Kapp said, "We invited Lilah and Roy to decades of parties. Lilah was great, from laughing and turning red when reading Cards Against Humanity out loud, to making great desserts for the party. No matter what game we played or how polite or impolite the game was, Lilah always participated wholeheartedly. One time, Lilah asked me how I liked her lemon bars. I responded that they were okay. My issue, I said, is that no one ever puts enough lemon in the bars or gets a good balance between lemon and sugar. At the next party, months later, sure enough, without Steve reminding Lilah, Lilah made a special batch of lemon bars for Steve, and she nailed it. And Lilah also thanked Steve because he would knee bend far enough that she never had to get on her toes to hug him, and that always made her giggle. Terry Shapiro wrote, "Lilah always had butter cookies in her freezer just in case. One time she made pickles, and she made sure my sons Jesse and Mark got a bottle. Lilah always made sure she had something coconut for Mark because she knew he liked coconut. And for Passover, Pesach, she'd always make her flourless chocolate cake. She'd tell many stories about her family and growing up on the Jewish West Side, where Terry was born. Terry says, Lilah was a wonderful lady. I will miss her." And Ann Stein wrote that Lilah knew how much I loved her pinwheel cookies, and she always made sure that they were on the oneg table when I saw her before or right after services. Lilah was truly a gem in our community, and we will all miss her. I hope that when Lilah crossed over to the Olam Haba, the Jewish conception of the afterlife, she was met by her 4 older sisters, her brother, her parents, and Roy. I hope she was reunited with them, that they surrounded her with tremendous joy and love, and that she and Roy are dancing together once again. I hope that the legacy of love, baking delicious treats, and living life to the fullest that she leaves to us today will continue to inspire and guide us through all the days of our lives. And in this way, death cannot separate Lilah from us, for when we remember her love, she continues to live on, even in death.
I'm going to recite the 23rd Psalm. If you know it, you're welcome to join with me. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He leadeth me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil. My cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever.
If you are able to comfortably do so at this time, I'm going to ask you to please rise. Ilmale rachamim, shochen bamrumim, hamitzei mechuna nechona, tachat kanfei hashchina, im kedoshim, utehorim kezor harakia, mazhirim, et nishmat Lilah bat Adel veluis shahalacha le'olama, Be'al harachamim yasti reha b'setek nafav le'olamim Vayitzror b'tzror hachayim mishmata Adonai hu nachalata v'tanuach b'shalom al mishkava v'nomar Amen.
Compassionate God, eternal Spirit of the universe, grant perfect rest in your sheltering presence to Lilah Nadler Warshawsky, who has entered eternity. O God of mercy, let her find refuge in your eternal presence, and let her soul be bound up in the bond of everlasting life. God is her inheritance. May she rest in peace, and let us say,
Amen.
Amen. May the memory of Lilah, whom you loved in life and still in death, bless and inspire your thoughts and actions.
Please be seated.
I wasn't going to come up and say anything or do anything. I would like to say, because when you were talking about them dancing in the last couple years of Bubby's life, I think when you get to a certain age, you can really reflect on your life. And she would say that she really just wanted to be a dancer. And even in some moments, she was like, she would say, I never actually wanted to, be a mother. And I mean, she wanted to just be a dancer. And I think that part of her life, she integrated it really beautifully with Roy, with my Zadie, because they would dance a lot. So a few years ago, Zadie asked me to learn a piece on the piano. He printed out the sheet music for me, and I learned it when I was living abroad, and I came back, and I would play it on the piano, and they would waltz in the living room. And I remember she eventually was with the walker, and she would waltz with the walker. And that song is really, I feel like I want to just play it one more time for her and for him. So if you don't mind, it's just a few minutes. And I haven't practiced it in a long time, so bear with me. imagine them dancing to that song.
Not all heartfelt tributes come in words. And that was a very heartfelt tribute. We're going to conclude the service with a burial at Jewish Oak Ridge Cemetery in Hillside, approximately a 30-minute ride in procession. Those of you who will not be going to the cemetery, we ask that you leave the sanctuary and go immediately to your cars and leave the parking lot. Those of you who will be going, when you leave the sanctuary, please go immediately to your cars. Make sure you have sticker and flags on your car. I want you to turn your headlights on manually, like we used to do in the old days. Actually physically turn the dial, not just the lights that come on automatically. And make sure you have your flashes on and stay as close to the car in front of you as possible to avoid gaps and spaces. I don't have to tell you that it's very cold outside. Please, for your own health and safety, if you feel you can't make it to the cemetery, that's okay. You'll be there in spirit, and your health and safety is more important at this point. Wendy, Barry, Marina, and Sage have been given the honor of being a pallbearer. And at this point, I'm going to ask the congregation to rise, and we're going to leave the sanctuary, and the immediate family is going to have some private time before they go out to their cars. You should all have a folder with maps and directions to the Warshawsky house, where they'll be observing the Shiva memorial period from 3 to 7 this evening. Thank you, and please make your way to the cars.